Hello and welcome to Devil's Advocate. How successful was the Indo-Pakistan summit in Thimphu, and has the conviction of Ajmal Kasab suddenly set back the Indo-Pakistan rapprochement? Those are the issues I shall raise in this first post-Thimphu interview with Pakistan's Foreign Minister, Shah Mehmood Qureshi. Foreign Minister, let's start with the subject that's right at the top of everyone's mind in India today, the conviction of Ajmal Kasab for his role in 2611. As Foreign Minister of Pakistan, how do you respond to this development?
Well, we have to begin with respect each other's judicial processes. Mr. Kasab has been found guilty on a number of charges. We will await the detailed judgment and we will give our considered reaction.
Now, Ajmal Kasab has been awarded the death sentence. Would you, as Foreign Minister of Pakistan, accept that, or would you plead for leniency?
Well, you have your judicial process, and we will have to respect each other's judicial process.
This, of course, is connected with the trial case of the Mumbai accused taking place in Rawalpindi. Now, Prime Minister Gilani has given an assurance to Prime Minister Manmohan Singh in Thimphu that this trial will be speeded up. But when at the same time we hear that Pakistan is seeking custody of Kasab, this sends up contradictory messages. So let me ask you up front, is Kasab likely to become a legal tangle that can hold up this particular case? And worse still, could Kasab also become a cause or a source of hostile rhetoric between Delhi and Pakistan?
It wasn't Government of Pakistan's request. It was the request or the requirement of the court. The Government of Pakistan was conveying the decision of the court.
But now that Kasab has been convicted, what happens? Clearly, he cannot be extradited. So is extradition going to be a sticking point as far as the trial of the Mumbai accused in Rawalpindi?
Well, I'm not a legal expert and I cannot give you a legal opinion on that. But I think we have a far bigger agenda on the table.
I'll come very much to that bigger agenda in a moment, Foreign Minister. But today, as I'm sure you appreciate, the Kasab issue is a major issue in this country. Let me quote to you what your colleague, the Interior Minister Rehman Malik, said on the 20th of April to The Hindu. He said, "The trial is on fast track. We expect the trial will be concluded in the coming months." And then critically he added, "The kind of credible evidence we have, we will get conviction." That clearly suggests that you don't need Kasab for conviction. Will that continue to be the case, or might that position now change?
Pakistan is serious in moving forward. The prosecution has laid out, in my opinion, a fairly good case. But we cannot sit in judgment. It's for the court to decide.
But this case will be put on fast track, won't it?
Certainly, we would want to see the case come to a close. We would want the logical conclusion of this trial, and the earlier, the better.
The second issue from India's point of view is, of course, Hafiz Saeed. Now, when Indian people hear the Pakistani claim that there isn't sufficient evidence to arrest Hafiz Saeed, even though his organization, the LET, was absolutely central to 2611, it makes them feel as if they're hearing someone make excuses about the fact that although Al-Qaeda is responsible for 9/11, Osama bin Laden can't be tried. That sort of argument, as I'm sure you understand, simply doesn't wash in India.
We are not making excuses. Hafiz Saeed was picked up and arrested twice by the Government of Pakistan. The courts in Pakistan did not feel that the evidence provided to them was legally tenable or sufficient, and they let him off. And judiciary is independent.
Let me quote you. As recently as the 5th of February, in a rally in Lahore, Hafiz Saeed publicly called for jihad in Kashmir. He also called for the liberation of Hyderabad. On that same day, his deputy, Abdur Rahman Makki, speaking in Islamabad, called upon Pakistanis to massacre Indian soldiers in Kashmir until the last soldier is dead. No action was taken against these gentlemen, and they remain free to threaten India. And people in India ask, why is the government not acting?
Firstly, this is not government policy. Individuals all over the world make statements, and we respect freedom of expression. But government policy and the stated policy of Pakistan is to have good neighborly relations with India.
Well, now the court in Mumbai on Monday has also found Hafiz Saeed and Lakhvi guilty of 2611. If you are requested, would you be prepared to extradite these gentlemen to face justice in India?
First, communicate the detailed judgment to us. Our legal experts will examine it, and then only will I be in a position to comment.
But you do seem to be suggesting that you might be open to considering extradition for these gentlemen when the judgment is officially and properly communicated to you.
I have said nothing of the sort. What I have said is it will be examined when the judgment is handed over to us, and we would want to move on. We would want to take steps to improve relations between the two countries. We would not like to vitiate the climate.
All right, I think many people will interpret that as you're having an open mind. Let's move on to the Jamaat-ud-Dawa itself. Even though it's been officially listed as a terrorist organization by the United Nations Security Council, it continues to operate freely and openly in Pakistan. It raises recruits, it holds rallies, it raises funds. Worst of all, it distributes leaflets advocating jihad in Kashmir. Why do you permit that?
The government of Pakistan has taken all necessary steps to, first of all, proscribe the organization, secondly, to freeze their assets, and do everything possible to discourage what they are distributing. But as you know, in every society, there are all sorts of people.
Can I interrupt and put this to you? You say you've done everything possible to proscribe the LET, but the truth is it hasn't been notified under the Anti-Terrorist Act. In fact, in September, when Hafiz Saeed was released by the Lahore High Court after you tried to detain him under the Anti-Terrorist Act, those were the precise grounds on which the judge released him, that the organization is not proscribed. So clearly, even by what you claim yourself, you haven't done everything you could have.
The organization is proscribed, and that is the factual position.
Then on what basis did the Lahore High Court release him? Because the judge in his verdict releasing Saeed said so specifically.
Well, judges are judges and they can pass verdicts.
So in other words, you're questioning the judge's verdict?
I'm not questioning his verdict. What I'm saying, he is independent and free to pass his verdict.
But you're also saying the judge is wrong.
I never said that. I said whatever the judges do, at times one has to respect their decisions.
Fourthly,
at times you can like, or at times you are not completely comfortable with their judgment, but you have to respect them.
Fourthly, the Indian government believes it has evidence that serving officers of the Pakistan Army, a certain Major Samir Ali and a certain Major Iqbal, are directly connected with 2611. And this evidence was part of the dossier made available to your Foreign Secretary in February. Will Pakistan investigate this issue and get to the bottom, or are you going to brush it aside and dismiss it altogether?
In the interactions that I've had, nobody has raised this issue with me so far. When the issue is raised, we would look at it with an open mind.
According to the Indian papers, this has been formally made part of the dossier given in February to your Foreign Secretary.
Well, a lot of times you know that papers write sensational stories.
The Home Minister of India, at a seminar where your High Commissioner was present, also publicly said that India had evidence of at least Major Samir Ali.
Well, we've invited the Home Minister, Mr. Chidambaram, to visit us in Islamabad for the Home Ministers, the SAARC Home Ministers Conference. And if he wants, he can have a meeting with his counterpart on the sidelines, and he can raise all these issues.
Now, sadly, Foreign Minister, in the last few days, a new issue of terror involving Pakistani citizens has come to international attention. I'm talking, in fact, about Faisal Shahzad, who, as you know, has admitted to being responsible for the Times Square bomb. He's admitted to undergoing terrorist training in Pakistan, and he's said to be the son of a Air Vice Marshal of the Pakistan Air Force. How do you respond as Foreign Minister to this development?
First of all, Mr. Shahzad is not a Pakistani citizen anymore. He is an American citizen. He is a naturalized American citizen.
Can I interrupt? Are you absolutely sure he's given up his Pakistani citizenship? I ask because your country permits dual citizenship, and it is possible for Mr. Shahzad to be both an American and Pakistani citizen. And news reports suggest that, in fact, 2 Pakistani passports and an American passport have been found on him.
I will have to check. I'm not aware of that. But I am aware of the fact that he is a naturalized American citizen, and the government of Pakistan will cooperate with the United States and help them in whatever way we can.
Now, sadly, as you perhaps know better than me, this is the 3rd time in a year that people of Pakistani origin have been arrested or detained in connection with terrorism and the United States. There seems to be a sort of pattern developing here. Does that worry you?
Well, citizens and individuals of various nationalities have been identified and have been arrested and picked up from different places in the world, not just Pakistanis.
Except for the fact that today, the Washington Times in America says that there are 10,000 jihadis a year being produced by Pakistan, despite the claim that you make that you're effectively fighting terror. And your own citizen Ahmed Rashid has written in the Washington Post today that North Waziristan is now a region that has become an even greater terrorist hub than Afghanistan was before 2001. The clear impression from just these 2 papers today in America is that Pakistan is a sort of terrorist-producing factory. Does that impression of your country not concern you?
Well, we are not claiming to be fighting a terrorist or terrorism. The world acknowledges our fight. They acknowledge the sacrifice that the people of Pakistan and the armed forces of Pakistan have made. They acknowledge the successful operations we've had in Swat, Malakand, and the tribal belt. And in Waziristan, we've had a very successful operation in South Waziristan, and we are moving on according to our plan.
And yet the impression in the world outside is that you're producing terrorists, as the Washington Times says, 10,000 a year. As your own countryman Ahmed Rashid says, Pakistan is a bigger hub than Afghanistan was before 2001.
Well, every individual has a right to say what he wants to, and he can write. And I respect Ahmed Rashid, as an individual, independent writer. But we do not have to entirely agree with his analysis. How has he come to this figure? I am, I have the foggiest.
Foreign Minister, let's take a break at that point. We'll be back in a moment. Don't go away. Welcome back to Devil's Advocate and an exclusive interview with the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Shah Mehmood Qureshi. Foreign Minister, let's come to the meeting between the 2 prime ministers in Thimphu, which both countries acknowledged was a significant step forward. But are you now worried that after the Qasab conviction, and more particularly after the implications of the judgment for Hafiz Saeed and Lakhvi, that small step forward could have come under a shadow?
I don't think so. I think the spirit in Thimphu has to be kept alive. That is the only sensible way forward. The 2 prime ministers agreed, and they reiterated their commitment for a resolution of issues through dialogue. They both acknowledged that dialogue is the only way forward. Yes, there will be difficulties. Yes, there will be such hiccups, but we have to move on. We have a much bigger agenda, and we should not let any individual, non-state actor, or any terrorist organization impede the peace process. We should develop it to such an extent that it becomes irreversible.
All right. Now, one thing that you have acknowledged yourself is that there is a trust deficit on both sides, and you've publicly said that you have certain ideas for tackling it. What precisely do you have in mind?
I think both sides would acknowledge the fact that there is a trust deficit, and the prime ministers have asked the two foreign ministers to bridge that trust deficit. I have certain proposals which I am going to share with Mr. Krishna when I get an opportunity to meet with him.
When will that opportunity come?
I would want it as early as possible, but I believe he is busy in the budgetary session. As soon as the budget session is over, I'm going to call him and I'm going to propose a number of dates for our engagement.
Now, in fact, the budget session ends on Friday the 7th, so will you pick up the phone Friday evening or Saturday morning? Is it as urgent as that in your eyes?
I think it is very urgent. I will pick up the phone and look at his convenience and call him at the earliest.
And what will you propose? That he come to Pakistan, or will you offer to go to India to expedite matters and take the process further?
I intend to invite him to Islamabad, but I have no issues with that. If he is occupied and he cannot come, then I have no issue in coming to Delhi.
Now, of course, from Pakistan's standpoint, the big critical issue is Kashmir. How would you like Kashmir to be handled hereafter?
Well, there are always, where there's a will, there's a way. And we acknowledge amongst ourselves that Kashmir is an outstanding issue between the two countries. But in my view, we can make progress through peaceful negotiations. We have undertaken and we have in place a number of confidence-building measures vis-à-vis Kashmir, and we can build further on them.
Now, it's widely believed in both countries that during the Manmohan Singh Musharraf years, the back channel reached understandings that could become the basis of a resolution of the Kashmir issue. And that has been confirmed specifically to me in separate interviews, both by General Musharraf and separately by Mr. Kasuri. The key issue is, do those understandings remain valid today, or has your government disowned them?
The present democratically elected government recognizes the significance of a back channel. At times, quiet diplomacy is useful, and we do not rule out the possibility of continuing the back channel. But I am of the opinion that the back channel can only work in tandem with the front channel.
But what has been agreed or decided or discussed on the back channel therefore remains valid?
That was between the then leadership. We will have to see. We are a democracy, and in a democracy, you've got to get it endorsed by Parliament. You have to have all stakeholders on board, and you know, there is a third party involved, and they are the Kashmiri people.
I understand. You are suggesting that as long as Parliament endorses it, it remains valid, but you'd like to have a chance as a democratic government to review it before you decide on its continuing validity.
Well, anything that has to be sold has to be endorsed in a democracy by Parliament.
One last final question. Does your civilian government have a free hand when it comes to India policy, or is the army chief in particular, perhaps also the ISI, looking over your shoulder?
I am confident that the foreign policy is being controlled by the Foreign Office, and I speak for Pakistan. I represent, and I, in consultation with other stakeholders, obviously I take the national security institutions and I consult with them, and I take them into confidence. I consult with the political leadership.
I hear what you're saying, but let me quote to Ahmed Rashid, writing in the Washington Post on the 27th of April, that's just about 7-8 days ago. He says, Pakistan's military has virtually taken control of foreign policy and strategic decision-making from the civilian government. And then he adds, thus Pakistan's foreign policy reflects the military's obsession with India.
Well, that is his point of view. There is a point of view floating in Pakistan that the foreign policy of India is not being formulated in the South Bloc. But do we really have to buy that?
All right. That's probably a fair point from your standpoint. My thanks to you for talking to us.
Thank you.
That was the Foreign Minister of Pakistan speaking exclusively to Devil's Advocate. Goodbye. Good night.